Good evening, everyone, and very welcome to our live webcast tonight. We are going to continue with the open Q&A session that we started off last time. So I will be answering as many of your questions as possible tonight. So this means that you need to make sure to make use of the chat window somewhere below or to the side of me and send us all your lovely questions so that I've got something to do tonight. It seems, not strictly speaking, already questions pouring in. This is most excellent. So Q&A tonight, post your questions in the chat and keep me busy. But before we do that, I just want to say a few words about the intro images that we saw. Which were from the Eurovision Song Contest. And if you want to learn more about how they are working with Capture, then we are posting a link to an interview now with the lighting designer Henk-Jan van Beek and the multicam director Marnix Kaart. It's a 10-minute, really interesting interview where they talk about how they are using Capture, not only for the lighting, but also some very detailed camera work. So if you haven't seen that already, check it out. So let's move on to the Q&A session. I've got a few questions left over from our last session that I'm going to start with one or two of those while you start shooting new questions into the chat. The first question I'm going to start with from the last webcast is from Check It Up 2004, who wrote, is it likely that Capture will implement the possibility that the lasso selection also respects the selection order? So what I'm going to touch on is the way selection order works in Capture to explain how it works right now. So what I have here is an array of fixtures. And what often happens is that you want to select them all together to, say, patch them or apply a channel number. One way of doing this is simply clicking on them one by one, which gets boring pretty fast. So the next obvious thing to do is to attempt a drag selection and select all of them. If you do this, you may discover that the order of the fixtures doesn't turn out the way you had expected. So the reason for this is that if I select fixtures and the selection rectangle is wider than it is tall, then you can trust that the fixtures are selected from left to right. So if I now were to apply a sequential unit here and switch over to plot view, you will see that we now have numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 because I selected a wide selection. If instead I select a tall selection, where I make a tall selection, then they will be selected from top to bottom. So if I now apply a sequential unit, let's start at 1 again. We now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you have a matrix of fixtures that you want to have selected row by row, or maybe column by column, the best way of doing that is to first select row by row, which you can do using the multi-selection, and then work with one of the sequential functions like unit. Let's start on number 1 again. And now we have 1 to 5 on the first row, 6 to 10 on the second row, and so on. So if you were to actually make a selection like this, where you select all of them, then to be honest, it's a bit of a lottery what happens. If you make that selection slightly wider than tall, capture will go from the left to right, but there's no guarantee in what order the fixtures of each column get selected. So the only thing that really works is 1 by 1, column by column, or row by row. And that is how the selection works today. Now, if you have assigned a specific order of fixtures, like a specific order of unit numbers or channel numbers, and you want to select the fixtures and have it remember that order, then at the moment this is not possible in Capture. And I know that in some lighting consoles, for instance, when you record a group, that group also preserves the order the fixtures were selected in, and this is not the case in Capture. So at the moment in Capture, when you make a fixture group or a regular group, then fixture order is actually not preserved. This is something we would like to fix, and this is where I'm actually answering the question. Will Capture likely implement this possibility? And I think we will likely, but I cannot tell you right now when that will happen. But someday we hope to get that done as well. So if you have questions, don't forget to write them in the chat so they are relayed to me and I can answer them. I got one question from Party Plus related to mirroring. The question is, can you go a little more in-depth to mirroring? Can't seem to find how it is working in terms of measurements. So I'm going to start off using the same project here. It's hard to prepare for this beforehand since I don't know what you will be asking. But let's assume we have a little arrangement of fixtures here that we would like to mirror to the right hand of the design here. So let's switch into paper mode because I think it is easier to see what's happening. So mirroring in Capture works by selecting the items you want to mirror and then using the mirror command. So far, so good. What happens here, or what is important here, is number one is that the direction can be either horizontal or vertical, and that refers to what you see in the current active view. So if you are in a top view, then horizontal means the x-axis, whereas if I were in a section view, then horizontal actually means the z-axis. So the first choice is, are we mirroring left to right or top to bottom in relation to the view we are looking at? The next piece of information in the mirroring dialog relates to an x, y, and z coordinate. And this is in fact the center of the mirroring. So if I apply the mirroring now, the center of the mirroring is actually at the tip of the rotation triangle. You can tell this by moving that rotation triangle before you activate the mirror function, and then if you had remembered the coordinates we saw before, you could see that the coordinates are now different. So we are at almost -1 meter and just 20 centimeters in z. Whereas if I move it up here and activate mirror, we are at x almost 5 meters negative. Now by default, when you select objects, the rotation anchor is positioned at the center of the selection of objects. And that is what you get by default when you activate the mirror command. Now you can override this if you want by typing in another coordinate for the x, y, or z here. So in the top view, horizontal is the x-axis, whereas vertical refers to the z-axis. So this explains why toggling between horizontal and vertical always only enables one of the text input fields. So imagine that we wanted to mirror these fixtures so that we had the same layout on the other side of the center line. One way of doing that could be first moving the rotation anchor so that it is somewhere on the center line, and then activating the mirror command, like this. Of course, it's hard to position the rotation triangle exactly on the center line, and this is why it is important that we can actually type in a coordinate here. So 0 meters obviously is exactly on the center line, which means we are getting a mirror along or around the center line. And finally, of course, if we check duplicate, we end up with another set of objects rather than just mirroring the ones that were selected. So I hope that was sufficiently in-depth. There are other things worth knowing about mirroring. So for instance, if we have additional information like some patch information, let's throw in some channels here. Which means that we now have these lovely little annotations that we can move and adjust in paper mode. And their position is also preserved when we mirror. So if I create another duplicate along the center line, okay, so I messed this one up. Let's assign some more channels. Yeah, so this is interesting in fact. So you can see that the annotation adjustments I made have been preserved through the mirroring, but some information was lost during mirroring. And typically the information lost is unit numbers, channel numbers, patch, and even circuit numbers, I believe. Since the assumption is you are actually adding fixtures to the show and they are not going to have the same information as the ones you already had. So Party Plus is also asking, is the center line always 0? Also, if I want to use mirroring like copying, so I mean the center line is a convention. So if you draw the stage so that the stage is positioned at 0, 0, 0 in capture, then the bolder grid line here will represent the center line. So it's really up to you how you set it up. If you offset the stage, by 2 meters to the left in the drawing, then either you've decided that the center line doesn't actually go through the center of the stage, or you messed up. So this is really up to you. One trick that you could use if you want to be more flexible with the position of the mirroring is to make use of another object. So I could use an illustration like, let's say, a sight line. And what happens here now is that the rotation anchor can actually be snapped to objects. So now I can snap the rotation anchor to this sight line here. So I could pre-position some specific points I know I will be mirroring around, because the sight line, of course, gives me access to specific XYZ coordinates. So I can use another object like a drawing dimension to support me later when I place the rotation anchor. So this way I can predefine some positions that I know I will be working with, like this, and then simply snap the rotation anchor there and know that when I mirror, it mirrors exactly around that point. So that's a nice trick you can use with mirroring. Johannes Verslot comments that he would like to see a remember mirror point function in the mirror pop-up view, since he finds himself typing the 0 a large number of times. That is very good feedback and an excellent idea. I think we might well do that. So in general, when you have thoughts and ideas about how something works in Capture, you can either save it for a live webcast like this, but I would also like to encourage you all to email support@Capture, because we do follow up rigorously on feature requests and comments like this. They go into spreadsheets, we keep track of number of people asking, and often we also get back to you with follow-up questions on, all right, that's an interesting idea, but how and when do you use this so that we can make a design that fits your situation as good as possible? It's easy to misunderstand where a feature request comes from and then implement it in a way that doesn't actually help you. So please mail us when you have feedback like this so that it can go into our feature planning. Johannes is also asking whether there is a way to mirror a group of Truss. So let's add a little bit of Truss here. I'm just undoing my way back to where we started. Let's grab a few Truss items, maybe from ProLight. I tend to always end up using the same items that I'm used to. Once you have a working recipe, why change, right? So H30V, here we go. Let's have a corner, that one will do. So Johannes asked about mirroring groups of Truss. So it doesn't actually make a difference whether you have really grouped the truss or not. So if I select these trusses here and I mirror them, let's have a larger view. Let's do it along the center line again and have a duplicate. You can see that the corners have been adjusted accordingly for the mirroring operation, and whether the trusses were actually grouped or not will not make a difference at this point. So Johannes, if you want to be more specific, then please comment on that. In case I missed your point here, I fear I did. Party Plus is asking, is there any way of making trusses always snap? I'm not perfectly sure I understand the question. Whenever you move truss, it snaps, and whenever you duplicate, clone, or add more truss, it also snaps. So I would like to believe that the truss is always snapping, but you can hold the escape key to prevent the truss from snapping, because sometimes, you know, you don't want the truss flying around like this. So hold the escape key. This completely disables the snapping. Now, if you look at the top left corner up here, there's actually a little help showing you that you can use the escape and shift keys to modify the behavior. So I could also use the shift key to force the movement to be orthogonal, or the escape key to prevent the snapping. So I hope that answered the question sufficiently. Alfonso comments, it should stop changing the unit to spot or wash or beam or bar or strobe. I'm afraid I don't quite follow the question. So Alfonso, if you could please clarify what you mean there, that would be great. Thank you. Now for a few other questions. Roy Arnevold is asking, what is the status of the MA3 viz key? And Rob Garcia is asking the same question. We have it almost finished, the implementation of WizKey support. We have it finished on Windows, and we are putting the final touches on the Mac implementation, and are anticipating releasing a 2021 Mark 1 update in a few weeks. So this should hopefully be available to you within a few weeks. It will work in the paid full Windows version and the paid full Mac version on Intel. MA3 doesn't support Silicon Macs yet, so that will presumably come a bit later. And it will not be available in presentations or the demo version of Capture. It will require the paid license, basically. Also worth knowing is that whether or not you have a viz key, that version of Capture will still receive MA3 MANet as long as you have the parameters licensed in the MA3 system. And if you have a viz key, it will also activate all parameters for visualization. So it's actually a two parts in one thing. It's both MA3net and viz key support in that same software update in a few weeks. Excuse me. Johannes is clarifying with regard to the groups and trusses. He could not mirror a group of truss today. The trusses were actually grouped. So maybe I'm in the wrong here, which does happen, even though I should know the software pretty well. So let's group them. So now they are grouped. Let's try mirroring. We should be taking bets on this. I have no idea. Now I'm really unsure. Indeed, you cannot actually mirror a group. Interesting. I think I'm going to make sure to come back to that question on the Capture Design and Visualization group on Facebook. I think Johannes is there. I can sort of remember there being a good explanation for this. Unfortunately, it doesn't come to my mind right here and now. So I will get back to you on that one. Maybe we could make it an option in the future based on whatever that reason was. Paul Rosinski is asking, related to CITP with Capture and Hog4PC. On the same computer, it's not talking with the Hog programmer as you select fixtures in Capture and right-click to focus. So when you use CITP to connect Capture with the Hog4, it does not support any selection or focusing talkback. Those features are only available if you use the HOG4 connectivity drivers, which are only available on Windows. So you have to choose between using the connectivity drivers on Windows that do give you that functionality, or the CITP connectivity, which does not, but has other benefits in terms of, I believe, the number of universes you can use, for instance. If I remember it correctly, the connectivity driver is limited to 16 universes, whereas the CITP connection is not. I hope I'm not wrong here, but it's an excellent opportunity to show you or encourage you to visit our website, to go to the connectivity page that you can find under the support menu, where you can find notes on limitations and functionality available when using different types of connectivity. So here, let me zoom in a bit, we can see in fact that with CITP we can have more than 16 universes with the HOG4, which actually it seems we can also with the HOG connectivity driver, although that only works on Windows and not with presentation files. So whenever you have questions like this, what can I do with this and that protocol with capture on this operating system, head over to the console connectivity page, where we try to gather all this information as neatly as possible to clarify these things. So we're not halfway, we are about half an hour in, so we are probably grabbing some of the last questions for tonight. I have a few piled up here already. Paul Rosinski is asking, what are the best practices on storing camera views? And honestly, I have no idea. I think it depends a lot on how you work and what suits you best. The two main obvious ways of going about it is using store camera in the camera menu, or patching the camera to DMX and controlling it from a lighting console, in which case you might have presets or some direct buttons on the lighting console, for instance, that you could use to jump to different camera positions. If you are working without the lighting console, then you are restricted to using the 5 camera positions inside Capture. And since you can't name them, you will have to remember by heart which is which. One neat bonus feature of using these camera positions is that we can transfer camera positions between views. So if this is the camera position we like, we can store that and then recall that on another view. So that is one way I have found myself working with camera positions, is when, for whatever reason, I just want to have the same view in another view, the same camera position in another view. The benefit of patching cameras to DMX, which you do in the Design tab View category, if you scroll to the bottom here, we have the patch for the alpha, beta, and gamma view. So one benefit here is that you can include camera positions in the programming of a song, for instance, or if you want to do camera movements and record them into a movie. That is when you would want to control them with DMX rather than the 5 built-in camera positions in Capture. That was a long answer. So let's see if we can squeeze in a few more questions here. Simon Ellis is asking, can you add fixtures with the same address, i.e. having 2 fixtures that you want to operate the same, like having multiple LED cans on the same address? And the answer is absolutely yes. Let me just bring a little bit of order, or actually let me load another project file where I believe this is already the case, or maybe not. It is not. So Here we have a number of profiles hung on a pipe in just above the audience here, focused on downstage. At the moment, these are all patched on their own DMX addresses. As you can see in the universe view here, they are all on their own DMX address. However, nothing prevents me from dragging a fixture and patching it so that there is more than one fixture on the same DMX address. What happens then in the live view, let's black them all out first. And now simply select that first fixture here, which overlaps in patch with the second profile. Now you will see that as I turn that on, I'm actually getting two fixtures lighting at the same time because they are hooked up on the same DMX address. So yes, you can definitely do this. There is nothing preventing you from doing it, and I do know that some people would like there to be a warning when this happens, and we are well aware of that feature request. Moving on, Party Plus has a follow-up comment on one of his previous questions where he had issues with corners and snapping. I'm afraid, since I don't quite follow here, maybe it would be better if you sent us an email to support@Capture, and I could look more closely into your specific example. Moving on, Kaio Productions is commenting on Alfonso's question. Is it possible to separate by fixture group the numbering sequence, or he believes that's what Alfonso meant. So basically at the moment there is no more functionality in order of selection other than that horizontal or vertical box selection, or if you go and select them one by one. But we do appreciate all your ideas here, and I will be taking note that it could be also connected to the type of fixture, for instance, or how they are in fixture groups. This makes sense. Now, in terms of the naming of the fields, so there are some comments here on whether it should be called unit or spot or wash, etc. There are so many different ways of working around the world with different terminology that we can't really customize, you know, whether it's called unit or spot. It would simply get quite complicated and very confusing. Not only for us, but also when exchanging capture files between each other. I know there's been some discussions on the capture group on Facebook recently in relation to these titles that we have here in the project, that they do not, like master electrician and TD, technical director, that these do not reflect how you work. And we are well aware that this, I mean, there's probably almost no one out there who identifies to 100% with these titles. So we've tried to make a compromise. But having said that, keep in mind that in the actual plot, where these are used, where it says project, client, drawing author, and so on, you can actually customize these texts. If rather than drawing author, you would like to have something like drafter, you can totally change these titles in the outgoing paperwork. We're still eager to have your feedback on the titles, but we might have to make a wider survey among all users on what the titles are in their countries and respective businesses, because this is something that changes a lot out there. So one or two more questions or comments. I made some remarks about MA Viz-Key support on on Mac and that only working on Intel. So if you are working on one of the new Macs, which has the Apple Silicon CPU, or the M1 as it's called, on the download page here we have a link to a page called, or well, it says read about limitations of Apple Silicon. And here we describe what currently does not work in Capture if you are on a Silicon Mac, unless you use the workaround. So if you use this pretty standard workaround, then in fact everything will still work for you. So it's only if you really want to push Capture to use your hardware fully that these limitations come into play. So keep in mind, everything still works on all Macs, it's just that it's not optimal on an M1 Mac for a few specific things like using NDI video streaming, in which case you will have to use Rosetta on Mac OS to run it as an Intel application. All right, end of PSA. I'm going to squeeze in one more question here. Johannes again is asking or saying, another idea I'm having is an option to remove the project name and project location from the live view, but still using the variables in the plot views. So let me just reopen. Okay, it looks the same. So there is this feature we've had for quite some time in Capture now, actually, that the project name, the location, I believe, and the date all appear automatically in the live views. There's also the ability to load a logo that appears to the left of this text information. However, you can turn this off, so if you do not want to see that in the live view, there is this option called project information that you can use to turn it off. That lets you still fill out these fields and use them in paperwork, but not see them in the live views. Some of these features that we've had for so long, you sort of forget to bring that up every now and then. You take it for granted. But there are a few options available here in the view. Another very important one is the widgets option. So if we switch to a top wireframe view here, the little cloud symbol that we have for the smoke of the project, as well as the camera symbols for the cameras in the project, they are called widgets, and they can be hidden and shown using the widgets option. So there are a few view options here that are worth playing around with in case you haven't already done so. So last question, and this will be from DJ Generis. He says, you can render an image, but is it also possible to record a movie of the live view so that we can record a live show as an example and send it to a customer? Yes, you can totally do this. Historically, people tended to use a screen recording software that would capture the capture visualization into a movie file. This is available, this is built in Windows under a feature called Game Center. So if you press Windows G, you get all these nifty things popping up that let you record a movie from the screen. However, what we suggest that you use is what's called snapshots. If you record a movie snapshot, then that is actually like a movie. And this doesn't record the graphics on screen as much as the DMX control signals. And this is important because it means that when you render this, you can do that at a better quality than you might get live on your computer. As Capture automatically adjusts the rendering quality on screen to how powerful your computer is, it means unless you have a very powerful computer, it will never get the fullest possible quality live on screen. So what you do is you use the record movie command, which has a start and end recording functionality here. Then you right click on your recording and say render movie. Lets you select an MP4 file, and then after some time you get a movie rendering of that movie snapshot you had recorded. And it seems we've just run out of questions here, and we've also sort of run out of time. So I want to thank you all for tuning in tonight. The next time we're back, we will be doing something else than a Q&A. It hasn't actually been decided what yet. If you have ideas about what you think we should be showing here or doing, then please let us know either in the chat or by emailing us or writing on the Facebook group. There's many things we would like to do, but that we cannot actually do right now because of the COVID thingy. So we hope to be bringing in more guests again in the future and taking some field trips. But yeah, at the moment, we're digging into what Capture has to offer in our little safe environment in the web studio for now. So thank you again for watching, and see you soon again. Good night.